Hey, welcome back to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast by Ohio State fans for Ohio State fans. From the West Coast, I'm your host, Zach Moore. Today is Sunday, December 22nd, 2024. Happy holidays. And thank you for joining me while I talk to myself about Ohio State's emphatic 42-17 win over Tennessee in the first round of the college football playoff in the Horseshoe last night. Now, in the postgame, Austin Ward was the first person on the OSU beat to ask Ryan Day a question, and I think Ward spoke for us all when he said, quote, "Ryan, I don't know any artful way to say this, but where was that performance hiding for your team?" End quote. And Day didn't really give a direct answer to the question. He gave credit to his seniors, and they were awesome last night. I'll talk about that in a minute. And Day's response isn't really the point here. The point is we had not seen a dominant four-quarter performance from the 2024 Ohio State Buckeyes until last night. Now, we saw glimpses of it over the last 3 months. The second halves against Iowa and Indiana, for example. The final drive against Penn State, another example. Then we saw what we saw 3 weeks ago in a huge moment against Michigan. So many fans, myself included, have been wondering after those 11 seniors decided to come back, after Caleb Downs and Jeremiah Smith were added to the roster, when will the juggernaut we've all been anticipating show up for the 2024 season? And as it would turn out, it was last night in an absolute do-or-die football game, and we were treated to an end-to-end dominant performance with the Buckeyes bringing everything they had to bear in coaching, scheme, and execution on the opponent, and it was glorious. It was far and away the best postseason performance by a Ryan Day team since the 49-28 win over Clemson in the 2020 playoff semifinal. I thought it last night had peak Urban Meyer vibes to it. It wasn't quite 59-0 in the Big Ten title game, but it was in the same ballpark in terms of a dominant performance. The Buckeyes will advance to the quarterfinal round on January 1st in the Rose Bowl, where they will be rematched with number 1 Oregon in a game that will be an absolute banger. This is a matchup many of us thought we'd see at least twice this season, though many of us thought it would be in the Big Ten title game. But it's just fine by me that it's in this round of the playoffs. Now, the very early line on that game is Ohio State minus 1.5, according to FanDuel. The Buckeyes will have the opportunity to avenge their 32-31 loss to the Ducks in Eugene back on October 12th. And as we well know, Oregon will present a much bigger challenge to the Buckeyes than the Volunteers did last night, but that's a conversation for another day. Today is about savoring a delicious, dominant win over a cocky Tennessee program whose fans boasted for days about turning the Horseshoe into Neyland North last night. So as I like to do on Sundays, I'm going to tick down a short list of observations from this game. As always, I'm going to assume you watched and you know what happened, so I'm not going to cover every single play. Let's start with the play of the Ohio State offense, and specifically the play of the beleaguered shorthanded offensive line. Now, according to PFF, Will Howard was pressured only 5 times last night. Star defensive end James Pierce Jr., Tennessee's top pass rusher, was limited to only 1 of those pressures. Donovan Jackson, playing out of position as we know at left tackle, led the Buckeyes with a pass blocking grade of 83.2. He did not allow a single pressure in 58 snaps. And many of us, look, we were highly skeptical of the plan to use a rotation of Tegra Shabola, Austin Serveld, and Luke Montgomery between the 2 guard positions in a game of these stakes. But for at least one night, Justin Fry's experiment worked. Shabola started at right guard and played 39 snaps there. Serveld started at left guard and played 27 snaps there, but he also played 19 snaps at right guard. And Luke Montgomery, who had not seen any live game action since Northwestern, played a career-high 31 snaps at left guard last night. Shabola led the Buckeyes with a run blocking grade of 78.8. It was far and away Shabola's highest run blocking grade of the season. He rotated with Austin Serveld at right guard most of the night. Serveld finished with a solid run and pass blocking grades of 65.6 and 63.5 respectively. Look, if you're grading out in the mid to low 60s on this offensive line, you're doing your job. Luke Montgomery was very good in the run game last night. He had a huge pancake block to spring Trey Henderson for a 29-yard touchdown run in the first quarter. In the very first meaningful action of his career, Montgomery finished with a very solid PFF grade for run blocking of 72.3 and an overall grade of 68.8. Against a top 5 SEC defense in a win-or-go-home playoff game, the Buckeyes ran for 156 yards on 31 carries at 4.7 yards per carry and 4 rushing touchdowns. As I mentioned, Will Howard was only pressured 5 times last night, and the Ohio State offensive line deserves huge credit for allowing all of that to happen. I thought Will Howard played his best game as a Buckeye last night, though he did throw another red zone interception. More on that in a minute. Howard finished the night 24 of 29 for 311 yards passing and 2 gorgeous touchdown passes to Jeremiah Smith that were absolute dots. Howard also ran for 37 yards on 5 carries. He was poised. He was deadly accurate, completing 83% of his passes at 10.7 yards per attempt. And he found his mojo in the vertical passing game for the first time in weeks, hitting Jeremiah Smith for a 37-yard touchdown pass on Ohio State's first possession of the game, and then he hit Emeka Egbuka on a 40-yard pass on Ohio State's second possession. That would set up a 1-yard touchdown run by Quinshon Judkins to put the Buckeyes up 14-zip with 8 minutes to play in the first quarter. Chip Kelly found a myriad of ways to set Howard up with easy throws to Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka. As fans, we've been begging Kelly and Day to lean into what they do best, and that's getting the ball to their playmakers on the outside through the air. And that's what they did early and often. Smith and Egbuka combined for 184 yards receiving on 11 receptions and 2 touchdowns that were both by Smith. Kelly was intentional about getting Trey Henderson involved in the passing game last night, which was awesome. Henderson finished with 54 yards receiving on 4 receptions. That included a 21-yard reception on a wheel route on Ohio State's first scoring drive of the game. If you're a regular listener of this podcast, then you know I've been shouting into the wind for 3 years about getting Henderson more involved in the passing game. So it was great to see that. Now, as well as Howard played last night, I do need to mention his red zone interception with 10 minutes to play in the second quarter with the Buckeyes leading 21-0. They had the Tennessee defense at that point on its heels. Pretty much everything Chip Kelly was dialing up was working. It was 1st and 10 from the Tennessee 20-yard line, and Howard tried to force a pass into Jeremiah Smith, who was matched up on a linebacker at the back of the end zone. Now, I understand that's a matchup Howard more often than not should take advantage of. But there were multiple defenders in the area, and I know, there should have been a pass interference called on that play. Smith was absolutely mugged by the linebacker in coverage. And I was debating this with my work friend Mike over text after the play. Mike didn't have a problem with it. He liked that Ohio State was being aggressive. But I thought in this particular situation, already up 21-0, it's first down. You have the whole playbook available to you at that point. Howard should have made a different decision there. Or at the very least, I think the ball should have had more mustard on it, right? He should have, thrown it, located the ball a little better than he did. Instead, Howard floated the ball, which on the deflection allowed Tennessee safety Will Brooks to pluck it out of the air for an easy interception. And that play gave Tennessee new life. It started a 10-0 run that gave the Vols momentum heading into the half, with Tennessee set to get the ball to start the third quarter. Now, as it would turn out, the Buckeyes would live to tell about that play, and it didn't have the impact on the game that I had feared in the moment. But look, a mistake like that in 10 days against Oregon in the Rose Bowl could be fatal. That was Howard's 4th red zone turnover in a high-stakes game this season. He also had red zone turnovers against Penn State, Indiana, and Michigan. And I'm sorry, those are completely unacceptable for a 5th-year senior. Period, full stop. You just cannot make mistakes like that, especially at this stage of the season. But that's my only critique of what was an otherwise sensational performance by Howard last night. One final observation about the offense. I want to go back to TreVeyon Henderson. Give it up for Henderson. 14 touches, 134 total yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Henderson averaged 8 yards per carry in the run game and 13.5 yards per reception. When Jeremiah Smith and Emeka Egbuka are cooking like they were last night, it has got to be absolutely demoralizing for a defense to then have to deal with TreVeyon Henderson. He was the perfect complement to Howard, Smith, and Egbuka, and it allowed the Ohio State offense to completely overwhelm a very, very good Tennessee defense last night. All right. Let's flip over to the defense, which played with a controlled rage last night that I don't think we've ever seen before under Ryan Day, and it was led by the seniors, JT Tuimoloau, Jack Sawyer, and Tyleik Williams. That trio combined for 20 pressures of Nico Iamaleava. Tuimoloau and Sawyer combined for 3.5 sacks and 3 batted passes. Tuimoloau finished as Ohio State's highest graded defender according to PFF with an overall grade of 85.6. He also finished with a team-high pass rush grade of 89.5. As a duo, Tuimoloau and Sawyer created the kind of havoc last night that Ohio State fans have been dreaming of since they were recruited as 5-star prospects in 2021. It's exactly what we had envisioned when they joined the program back then. Excellent performance out of those two last night. Now, Cody Simon led the defense in tackles once again with 12, including a crushing hit on Nico Iamaleava that cracked Iamaleava's helmet. I've never seen that before. They had to replace his helmet in the middle of the game. I also thought Lathan Ransom was excellent last night. Ransom finished with the defense's highest PFF grade for tackling of 81.5. I thought the secondary was excellent in coverage on Tennessee receivers. We did not see a pass interference penalty out of Davison Igbinosun last night, so kudos to him for avoiding that. I also, I don't want to throw a wet blanket on what was a truly excellent defensive performance, but Tennessee offensive skill players were dropping like flies in this game. Star running back Dylan Sampson only played 16 snaps because of what looked like a hamstring injury. Sampson finished the night with only 6 yards on 2 carries. And starting receivers Dante Thornton Jr. and Squirrel White also had to lead the game with injuries. Thornton only played 25 snaps. White only played 16 snaps. Now, Tennessee was not very dynamic at receiver to begin with, and I'm not sure how much either would have helped the Vols last night, given the pressure the Ohio State defense front was putting on Iamaleava. But, for them to lose Thornton especially as their only real vertical threat was a pretty big break for the Buckeyes. And as we turn our gaze toward Oregon on January 1st in the Rose Bowl, that offense is going to be fully operational with, as we know, much more talent and ability at the skill positions than Tennessee. And Buckeye fans already saw firsthand on October 12th what Oregon can do offensively. So, look, savor that performance last night, but just know that a much bigger challenge for the Silver Bullets is coming on January 1st. And much more to come on that game in the coming days. Paige, Chad, and I are going to have a complete preview of the Ducks and Bucks Part 2 coming very soon. This morning, our friend Mikey Corcoran, I think, summed up what most of us in Buckeye Nation are feeling today when he said, "I feel like world order has been reestablished." And personally, look, I have more faith in this team, in the seniors, and the coaching staff than I did 24 hours ago. But this is only the beginning of what we hope is a 4-game run to the national title that has much, much bigger challenges ahead. So just buckle up, Ohio State fans. We're only just getting started here. Finally, I want to address one more thing before I sign off today, and those are comments by both Nick Saban on Friday afternoon and Kirk Herbstreit during the telecast last night about Ohio State fan sentiment in the wake of the Michigan loss a few weeks ago. Now, Saban called it negative bullshit. He said a bunch of things, but among what stood out about what he said is he called Ohio State fans' attitude, sentiment, quote, negative bullshit. And Herbstreit last night said, quote, "The lunatic fringe at Ohio State is as powerful as anywhere in the country. It used to be 8 to 10%. I think it's grown now to about 15 to 20. I'm sure they'll be happy tonight, fired up about what the team did, but God forbid they lose to Oregon. They'll want a fire day again," end quote. First of all, former millionaire head coaches in the media like Saban would sooner eat a bag of broken glass than criticize another millionaire head coach. They abide by this silly code that no matter what, they won't be critical of other coaches. Okay, fine, Nick, you've got your code, whatever. But I found Saban's comments on Friday to be inauthentic and dishonest and an insult to fan intelligence. He knows better than anyone what it takes to win at a high level in college football. He held himself and everyone who ever played or coached for him at LSU and Alabama to an extremely high standard. There is no other way to win 7 national championships than to do that. And much of what has happened under Ryan Day that's been problematic over the last 3 or 4 seasons, questionable coaching hires, roster construction mistakes, fourth quarter collapses, a combined 0-6 record versus Michigan and Oregon since 2021, All of that would have been completely unacceptable under Nick Saban. So to take shots at OSU fans who had every right to be critical and concerned after what happened against Michigan this year, actually, I don't think it's helpful to Ryan Day at all. All that's going to do is piss fans off even more. And it's just an insult to our intelligence. So look, just stop trying to fucking gaslight me, Nick Saban, okay? And as far as Kirk Herbstreit is concerned, he knows good and goddamn well that Ohio State supporters are not a monolith. There are the lunatic fringe, as he calls them, who are very easy to spot. They're still a very small percentage of the fan base, and they should be ignored. And there are others who just want to love the thing they love and not have to hear any criticism about it. And that's fine. I'm looking at you, Chad Plummer. You are clearly one of those fans, and there is plenty of room in the Ohio State fan universe for you, my friend. And more power to you if that's the way that you want to operate as a fan. But for me, there are those of us who care deeply about the program. We invest in it way more than the average fan, and we want it to succeed at the highest level. And sometimes that requires being honest about what we're seeing to force positive change. And I truly believe the feedback that the coaching staff and the players received from the fan base over the last 3 weeks had an influence on what we watched last night. That's how it works. That is our role as fans in upholding the standard that makes Ohio State great. Now, it's also our role that when the Buckeyes play to their potential and win a huge game like they did last night, to revel in the victory and to celebrate the players and the coaches. And that's certainly what I did last night, and I got a big old hangover this morning to prove it. Now, I thought Doug Lesmerises addressed this situation much more eloquently than I did on his Kings of the North podcast last night. I posted a clip of those comments on our X account. If you're a fan like me, I invite you to listen to the whole clip. It's worth the 3.5 minutes, so go check it out. Okay, that's going to do it for me. Check your feeds for a preview of the Rose Bowl from Paige, Chad, and me in the coming days. Until then, thanks so much for listening. Merry Christmas, everyone, and go Bucks. You've been listening to the South Stands, a Buckeye football podcast. Follow us on X at South_Stands.